How much do we know about the people we run into every day on the street? Perhaps something dark and dangerous lurks behind the calm facade. Today's story will provoke thought about what might be lurking in the depths of an ordinary person's soul. Some people are born to create, to shine like the stars. Unfortunately, even they are not immune to encounters with those who can interrupt their creativity for a few $100s. In 2006, among the many offices converted from apartments in Manhattan was the studio of a fairly famous actress, director, and screenwriter named Adrienne Shelly. Her real last name was Livin. She was born on June 24, 1966 in Queens, New York, USA. At the age of 2, the girl moved with her family to Long Island. From a young age, Adrienne had a natural predisposition for acting skills. She was a genuine little actress. When her parents noticed this, they tried to support the child in discovering her talents by enrolling her in various theaters and acting classes. At the age of 10, Adrienne found herself in one of the most popular art centers. Many famous actors trained there, including Robert Downey Jr. and Natalie Portman. It was here that the young Adrienne realized that the stage was her calling. At the age of 11, she landed her first proper role, the lead role in a musical. She later admitted that this was the impetus for further successes. Parallel to her favorite activities, she was a normal teenager who enjoyed spending time with friends with whom she had no problems thanks to her sociability. Everything seemed to be going well, but at the age of 12, she suffered her first bereavement. Her father, Sheldon, passed away suddenly. From that moment on, she decided to use the stage name Shelley to immortalize her father's name. Sheldon always supported the young talent more than her mother did. After her father's death, her mother even tried to steer her daughter in a different direction, suggesting Adrienne choose a more traditional path for her university studies. She encouraged her interest in the film industry and acting, but believed it was a very saturated field with strong competition, making it difficult to succeed. Perhaps her daughter should have chosen something easier, but the young actress was unstoppable. From the beginning, Adrienne confidently pursued her chosen path. She studied at Boston University in the Faculty of Film Production, specializing in directing. Judging by most sources, she never completed her university studies, but the knowledge she gained was enough to succeed in the future. Her persistence had the greatest effect, as she never lost faith in herself and always kept going. At the age of 18, she moved out of her parents' house with 3 others she studied with at university. They all wanted to become actresses, but initially everything was limited to castings and failures, at least for her friends. But this is a common situation in the film industry. The competition was always very high. Adrienne did not give up hope of finding herself in cinema. She dedicated all her free time to searching for roles and managed to land a few smaller roles in films as an extra. This was enough to stay afloat. In 1989, there was a groundbreaking event. She met the director Hal Hartley, who offered her a lead role in the film The Unbelievable Truth. For Adrienne, it became a stellar moment and the official start of her acting career. Her warm relationship with the director worked very well. She became his muse. This allowed her to get one role after another in his films. Thus, the aspiring actress gained recognition not only in New York but also in Hollywood. She gradually established herself in the largest center of film production in the United States. She was given the green light. She received several offers from Los Angeles for leading film roles, but Adrienne Shelly rejected most of them. She wanted to stay here and continue to expand her career. New York was a more powerful center of the film industry for her, even more so than Hollywood. Adrienne Shelly did not miss the opportunity to develop further. She focused on her work and methodically created the foundation for further success without moving away, and it worked. She starred in many films, especially in independent productions and comedies. During this time, Adrienne came up with the idea that she wanted to try her hand as a screenwriter and director. In 2001, she met a man named Andy Ostroy with whom she began a romantic relationship. The couple married, and in 2003 the lovers had a daughter named Sophie. While she was still pregnant, the future mother began writing a screenplay for the film Waitress, a romantic comedy. The script was very true to life. The protagonist was pregnant and had to flee her abusive husband who terrorized her in their marriage. This was quite risky, as pregnancy in films is traditionally portrayed positively. Adrienne Shelly, however, highlighted another side of this delicate situation by emphasizing the difficulties a woman faces during this time. She believed that this vision would clearly work as something innovative. After Sophie's birth, the woman decided to continue working in the film industry. The film actually became a success. It was a genuine stellar moment for Adrienne. The film was presented to the public in 2007. Adrienne directed it herself and played one of the main roles, but she was not granted the triumph. While working on Waitress, she rented an office on Abingdon Square in the West Village in Manhattan. It was a standard apartment where Adrienne spent her time alone. It had become something of an island of security for her. Adrienne created a special atmosphere there. The woman treated the improvised studio with great love and respect. She was sensitive, even overly so. Everyone who visited her workplace noticed this. It was obvious that Adrienne Shelly had a great future ahead of her. The tragic end to her burgeoning career was all the more terrifying and shocking. November 1, 2006 was a completely normal day for the family. As always, Adrienne woke up early and got ready for work in her office. Husband Andy and daughter Sophie woke up as usual. The husband had to take the girl to daycare. Since he was also an actor and producer, he drove to work afterward, dropping his wife off on the way. The couple usually maintained constant contact during the day. They called each other and talked about all the events happening around them. They continued this tradition for years. But on November 1, Adrienne Shelly was silent, which seemed very unusual. She didn't call even once and didn't answer her husband's calls. Initially, this didn't particularly worry Andy. He knew how dedicated his wife was to her work. Perhaps she was very busy as she wanted to start several new projects that day. The man decided she was simply too engrossed and didn't want to distract her unnecessarily. His work lasted until the evening. After finishing his shift, Andy called his wife again, who once again ignored him. This all started to seem strange. Around 5:30 p.m., Andy picked up his daughter from daycare. Adrienne was still unreachable. The situation was starting to become genuinely worrying. Whenever her spouse was busy, she found time to communicate with her husband. She should have at least called back or sent a message that she was very busy. But this time, it all seemed increasingly disturbing. The weather in New York left much to be desired, and so Andy often picked up his wife from her rented office on such gloomy days. He planned to do the same this time, so he called his wife to arrange a meeting. Again, she didn't pick up. Andy could no longer calm down. His wife's behavior seemed too untypical. He took the child to her grandmother and asked her to look after Sophie while he went to his wife's office. Andy did not have a spare key to her office. When he arrived at the residential building, he went directly to the doorman, who should have a master key. The doorman refused to give it to the man because of strict rules, so Andy tried to persuade him to go upstairs together. The doorman knew Adrienne Shelly well, partly because she was already a celebrity and he also knew her husband. The employee noted, however, that Adrienne had not left the building all day. It was too late. The woman had to finish her work and was on her way home. The concierge agreed to Andy's suggestion but stayed on the floor, handing over the keys. However, they were not needed. The door was unlocked. The actress had a habit of treating her office with great care. She always locked it, even if she was only leaving for a short time. Naturally, she locked the door from the inside so that no one was in the way. Upon entering the studio, the man immediately noticed his wife's clothes and shoes, which were in their usual place. There was a special spot for them, so she had to be inside. Andy immediately called out to her, but no one responded. The tension grew more and more. Desperately, he searched all the rooms for his wife. Grocery bags stood untouched in the kitchen. The sheet was torn from the bed in the bedroom, but there was no trace of the woman. Andy made his way to the bathroom, where he discovered the body of 40-year-old Adrienne Shelly. The woman appeared to be hanging from a sheet fastened to the shower rod. Horrified, the man screamed and immediately tried to free his wife to help her. The building superintendent was on the landing at the time. He heard the screams and immediately contacted the police and emergency services after realizing that something disturbing had happened. When the police arrived at the scene, they found Andy Ostroy in tears. He was shaken and took a long time to recover. The investigators concluded that the successful actress and director had voluntarily ended her life. Andy, however, immediately rejected this idea. He didn't even try to accept this version of events. The husband knew very well that his wife never had problems with depression, psychological disorders, or any addictions. Not the slightest prerequisite that could lead a person to voluntarily end their life was found. Quite the opposite. Her career was booming at the time. Everything was going well. Each subsequent production seemed better than the last. Adrienne Shelly had a wonderful relationship with her husband and a small daughter whom she loved very much. This version also raised many questions from a moral perspective. Adrienne had lost her father at the age of 12, so she would never do that to her daughter. However, law enforcement agencies continued to insist that a depressive state is not always linked to problems in private and family life. All of this can happen unnoticed and in secret. On the outside, a person may even appear completely normal and happy until the last moment, and no one will know what serious difficulties they were actually struggling with during this time. Andy would not give up. He constantly pressured law enforcement agencies, demanding a more thorough investigation. He considered the initial conclusion absurd. His wife had been murdered, and Andy Ostroy was determined to prove it. A tough fight lay ahead because the autopsy revealed that Adrienne Shelly's cause of death was the sheet tied around her neck. But even after that, the widowed Andy increased the pressure and continued to insist that the case be treated as a murder. Naturally, such claims needed a solid foundation. There was no blood or sign of a struggle in the office, practically nothing to suggest that an outsider had been in Adrienne's studio the day she died. But there were some oddities. Would a person who was ready to voluntarily end their life go grocery shopping and act as if they had plans for tomorrow? Upon closer examination of the crime scene, something suspicious was found. There was a barely visible shoe print on the toilet lid. It was therefore suspected that the prints could actually belong to an unknown person. It looked as if the intruder or the victim herself had stood on the toilet lid to reach the shower rod and tie the sheet. It could also have helped lift the victim's body. It was obvious to Andy that this trace was left by the perpetrator. The man said that his wife was so obsessed with the cleanliness of the studio that she even set up a special cupboard and a display case next to the door, where everyone who came in had to put their shoes and boots. She didn't allow anyone to walk around the apartment without taking off their shoes. The man had witnessed repeatedly how people who forgot this rule became the subject of extreme displeasure on his wife's part. It is obvious that only a person who entered the premises without her consent, without asking Adrienne Shelly for permission, could have left a shoe print on the toilet lid. His words were confirmed by everyone close to the actress who had visited the studio at least once. The investigators decided to pay more attention to the footprints. They checked the profile and analyzed the size of the shoes. The results confirmed the statements of the widowed man. The pattern did not match the configuration or size of the shoes worn by Adrienne and her husband. Furthermore, fingerprints were found on the shower rod that did not belong to the deceased. Attempts were made to remove them, but not thoroughly enough. Everyone in the deceased's immediate vicinity was checked, but no one wore similar shoes. The fingerprints also did not match the couple's acquaintances. The analysis of the marks on the toilet lid showed that they originated from chalk or similar dust. Apparently, this type of dirt is rarely found in offices and apartments where no renovation work or similar activities are taking place. The investigators suspected that the trace could have come from someone involved in the construction or renovation trade in some way. Initially, it was assumed that Adrienne was expecting a tradesman that day. However, no one had heard anything about this. The woman would certainly have told her husband about it, but the studio was actually fine. Adrienne did not need the services of a tradesman. One of the investigators handling the case recalled something strange. When the actress was found dead, a noise could be heard in her studio. There were sounds of hammering and drilling. The police naturally treated this assumption with a degree of skepticism but decided to check it out. Renovation work was indeed underway beneath Adrienne Shelly's studio. The apartment belonged to a man who had nothing to do with the victim and didn't even know her. He confirmed that men were working there on November 1 to complete the final phase of renovations. He himself was not living in the apartment at the time, as the construction company had to tear down walls and erect new partitions. This seemed strange, as such work produces a large amount of dust that leaves white marks. The apartment owner allowed the investigators to look around the apartment freely. There was still a large amount of dust which was taken away for examination. It was later confirmed in the laboratory that it was identical to the footprints left in Adrienne's apartment. This meant that one of the employees had been in her office. The investigators then turned to Bradford's general contractor, who had provided the men for the job. The police were interested in who exactly was on the construction site during this time. Difficulties arose at this stage. It was common practice for this organization to employ workers who were not officially hired to keep the cost of the work low. This was common in the United States at the time when the influx of migrants began. Many of the employees were here illegally and without a visa. After some time, however, the project organizer was able to list all the people who were in the apartment on November 1. The main suspect turned out to be Diego Pilco. At that time, the man was only 19 years old. He came to the USA shortly before the tragedy and immediately took a job at Bradford to save money for starting his own business. First, he wanted to pay back a man in his home country of Ecuador who had lent him money for the relocation to the USA. The man behaved strangely, sometimes even fearfully. Diego was quickly found. He was still working for the organization. The man was taken to the station for questioning, and the investigators did not beat around the bush. He was asked directly about the murder of Adrienne Shelly. Contrary to expectations, Diego did not begin to deny it and immediately confessed. This happened almost immediately after he was in the office. When he told his version of events, he repeatedly mentioned that it was an accident. He insisted that he was a good person who was only in a desperate situation and struggling with financial problems. According to his confession, on November 1, he was in the apartment below Adrienne's studio with several young men. They were all carrying out one of the final tasks. There was a lot of noise because the walls were being torn down, but it seemed like a normal job. According to Diego, who came downstairs an hour after the work began, the young woman was very unhappy about the noise. She was rude, shouted at them, and claimed that the workers were preventing her from concentrating. Diego described her behavior as if the stranger was trying to belittle him, believing that her work was more important. She demanded that the workers not make any noise, which seemed absurd to him, as tearing down walls is not quiet. Furthermore, the young people were not violating any regulations. They calmly explained the situation to Adrienne Shelly, but the woman didn't listen, went into the apartment and began throwing her hands up. In a fit of rage, Diego grabbed a hammer and threw it in her direction. The actress miraculously managed to dodge the tool. After that, she started screaming even louder and threatened to call the police. With those words, the woman left the apartment and went upstairs. Diego followed her. He realized he had overreacted and begged Adrienne not to call the police. He was afraid that there would be trouble and that he would be threatened with deportation to his home country. Adrienne didn't listen to him. She was angry. When she entered her studio, Diego grabbed her sleeve and pulled her, continuing to plead with her not to call the police. She probably understood this as an attack and started screaming. Diego lost control again and hit the woman in the face. She then fell, hit her head, and stopped moving. The young man assumed that he had misjudged his strength and that the woman died from the blow to the head. He fell into a real panic. The construction worker locked himself in the office and began to think about how to proceed. Adrienne did not get up or regain consciousness. Diego finally realized that he had killed a person. He then decided to cover up the traces of the crime, so he took a sheet from the bed and staged a voluntary departure from life in the bathroom. That was the young man's original confession, but the police did not believe him. The first inconsistency that the police officers noticed was the complete absence of dust on the deceased's shoes. If she had really gone into the apartment where the repair work was taking place, as the murderer claimed, her shoes would inevitably have left traces. Furthermore, the actress's shoes were on a specially prepared cabinet, so she took them off, which also did not fit the young man's story. According to his words, she simply did not have time to take off her shoes and put them there. Another major contradiction was the complete lack of witnesses to Adrienne Shelly's outbursts. Even other employees did not confirm the perpetrator's statements that the woman came to them and cursed. During this time, there were enough neighbors in the apartments who should have heard the scandal and the noise the actress was making, but no one heard anything. Another inconsistency was discovered by Andy. The deceased's husband pointed out the lack of cash in his wife's wallet, even though she was a person who preferred to use banknotes instead of credit cards. She always carried at least a few $100s with her, sometimes larger amounts for various needs. This small peculiarity made the probable motive easy to understand. The illegal immigrant simply wanted to enrich himself at Adrienne's expense. Most importantly, however, the medical examiner determined that the circumstances of the woman's death did not align with the perpetrator's version. Shelley was still alive when she was hanged, and the cause of death was strangulation. No head trauma was found. Despite all the inconsistencies, Diego maintained the version that Adrienne Shelly herself had provoked the conflict for a long time. Under the pressure of the obvious contradictions, Diego's story began to change. The investigators spoke with the suspect's inner circle to get a sense of what kind of person he was. Unfortunately, he had hardly any contact with anyone outside of work. Everyone who did business with him knew that Diego Pilco was in financial difficulties and desperately trying to pay off his debts. Otherwise, he seemed like a normal young man who wanted to establish himself in the United States. In conversations with the residents of the apartment building, several witnesses were found who reported Diego's suspicious behavior. According to one woman, the suspect had the unpleasant habit of staring at women for a long time. These glances seemed disturbing. However, no one noticed any aggression on his part, nor did he attack anyone. Andy continued to insist that Diego's version was a lie. He was only trying to justify himself. His spouse was never aggressive and always treated other people's work with respect. No matter what, the lack of cash in the wallet, however, pointed to Diego's true intention. He may have been in Adrienne Shelly's apartment to commit a robbery. No equipment, devices, or other valuables were missing, but a few $100s were gone. Shortly before the trial, which was scheduled for 2008, the defendant presented a new version that seemed more convincing than the previous one. According to him, Diego Pilco arrived at his workplace along with Adrienne. As they rode the elevator, he stared at the young woman. Suddenly, he realized that he had seen the actress somewhere and quickly realized that he had a celebrity in front of him. Diego immediately concluded that she had money and decided that this was a chance to solve all his financial problems. In his opinion, there was definitely something to steal in the actress's apartment. He pretended to go up to the top floor to find out where Adrienne got off and which apartment she went into. He watched and listened all day, calculating the moment the woman left the apartment, probably to go to the store. She returned a short time later and, as was her habit, undressed, leaving her clothes and shoes in the cabinets. The woman carried her bags. She did not lock the door behind her because her hands were full. She went into the kitchen, apparently to sort the groceries she had bought. Diego closely observed her every step. Standing on the landing, he saw that the door was ajar and a bag with a wallet was hanging out. The temptation was irresistibly great and he had the opportunity to steal. The intruder cautiously looked into the apartment, determined that Adrienne could not see him, so he went inside, took the wallet, and took out the cash. Just as he was about to pocket it, the woman came back and confronted him. And she screamed and went to the phone, apparently to call the police. Diego panicked, caught up with her and covered her mouth and nose. Quite quickly, she became unconscious due to the strangulation. He realized that it was too risky to leave a robbed victim alive. Adrienne Shelly had seen the worker downstairs more than once and could easily identify the robber. The intruder decided to stage a voluntary death and used a sheet and the shower rod to do so. He confirmed that he stood on the toilet lid to reach the victim and hang her. In court, the perpetrator apologized to the actress's family, whose creative path had been tragically interrupted. Of course, no one would forgive him. Andy hoped that it would be possible to achieve a life sentence for this subhuman. The court's decision was all the more shocking. Diego was sentenced to 25 years in prison for manslaughter. He would be released from prison shortly before his 45th birthday. Although the verdict seemed unjust, it was final. After all these tragic events, Andy wanted to immortalize his wife's name in history. He founded a foundation of the same name which provides scholarships and financial incentives for young female directors. Furthermore, her husband made a film about her, showing the tragic path of this strong woman. For the final episode, he even met Diego in person, who gave a brief interview and told the story of his villainy on camera. Thank you for watching and take care of yourselves.